I'm Craig Eason of Lloyd's List, and we're continuing our look at the impact of piracy. One issue that needs to be further addressed is that of the impact of the seafarer. With me is Peter Swift from one of the associations now being developed to actually look at this issue. Could you tell me a little bit more about how you see the impact of piracy on the seafarer, and are we ignoring this fact?
We are not totally ignoring it. We spent a lot of time as industry partners responding, preparing best management practices and encouraging governments to maintain support for actions against pirates. The element that we now need to address is the impact that piracy has on the human side, on the people, on the seafarers and on their families. And that's what we're now really trying to put the focus on with our new programme.
What sort of impact do we then see on seafarers that have been held captive by the pirates of Somalia?
Well, let me first of all say that it's not just those that are held captive. Every day of the week, about 100,000 seafarers are either sailing in or towards piracy areas. That means for them there is the fear, the worry, the uncertainty of what they may encounter. They may be shot at, and nothing else may happen. They may not have any attack at all, but they're still worried that it might happen. They might find that they're in a citadel and that the ship is then subsequently rescued by navies, or that the pirates have left them and so they're then safe. Or they might, in that extreme case, also be held hostage and captive. And all of those are fears and worries that they have. At the same time, of course, their families are worried. The day that the seafarer takes off on his next voyage, the next ship, the families are thinking, what are the risks? What might he endure and what might we endure if something goes wrong?
It sounds like there needs to be more action from some of the ship owners in terms of accepting the responsibility of the psychological health of the crews that they have underneath their responsibility.
Well, there are three areas, and ship owners and others do have responsibilities. I mean, we actually break our programme down into the three stages, making sure that before the departure of the seafarers that the plans are in place, that the proper training is in place, and as far as it's possible also to harden the individual. We spend a lot of time hardening the ships with best management practices, and there are methods and means that you can actually prepare people for what they might experience. That preparatory work is part of a hardening process. At the same time, companies need to ensure that if things go wrong, they know how to contact the families, who to contact, what they will do by way of providing information support during an event. And then post-event, both the seafarer and their family should be entitled to reasonable care and support.
Have you seen a different level of response depending on the nationality of the crew? Is that a factor?
Well, inevitably there are differences. Sometimes it's nationality. But let me say first of all that some companies and organisations do an excellent job. And as in most things in shipping, there is a spectrum. Those at the top end that are doing a superb job, those in the middle that are responsible but not necessarily have put in place everything they ought, and unfortunately a lot at the bottom end that have nothing in place. You can then overlay that it may have some national characteristics and that might be a factor, but it's not a particularly strong factor. I think it's actually the different levels of different companies worldwide that's more important.
Do you have the fear that the cost of looking after the crew is one of the factors that has left them slightly abandoned and feeling left out by the ship owner?
No, I don't think it is actually the cost to the company. I think in many cases it's that the company has not actually thought through what is required. It's not a high-cost activity, doing the right training beforehand, preparing your contingency plans for the what-if event, and being able to provide a level of support afterwards. It's not an expensive cost of support, it's actually making sure that the right people with the right training are available to help. And it's covered in some cases by P&I clubs, it's covered in some cases by owners, in some cases it's covered by unions. But I don't think it's just a money issue. I think in many cases it's the fact that people just haven't thought through the whole process, from what it's like the day before you sail to what it may be like if you've had an incident and eventually return home.
Speaking to some of the crews that have been involved in piracy attacks, I get the feeling that they're quite strong in terms of how they can respond to it, to other people. Is there the issue of them actually withholding some of their emotions and it coming out a year, 2 years later?
Well, without doubt, I think in any trauma situation, people will say this can have quite a long-term effect, and it may well be that it's even 10 years later that it's actually manifesting itself. But do people bottle it up? Seafarers are a pretty resilient bunch. They're used to being on their own, of course, a lot, and isolation is a normal factor. Some are better able to cope, and it is possible, actually, as I said earlier, to build the hardening of an individual, to build that resilience for events, to build the resistance that's necessary if things do go wrong, and then also to be able to have the right responses. The responses are that there's the initial shock of the event, then there's a sort of reality dawning, and then there's a need for recovery. And if you can actually analyse the process and put in place the right programs to support that, then in fact you can do a lot to help the individual.
Peter, thank you very much. This is Craig Eason for Lloyd's List.